His head's starting to spin, his vision starting to blur, and there's so much light around River. He was this river of life and light, and he's trying to breathe. Hi everyone, welcome back to Silent Echoes. This channel is mostly about music and musicians, and when we think about River Phoenix, we think about his acting career and of course his tragic death, which puts him square into that line of Silent Echoes. He had the same disposition as a lot of these people, something bigger than himself that ate him up and ended up in his untimely death. There's this mixture in his presence and then in his performances of naivete on the one hand, for sure, and then toughness, that street urchin kind of quality, which goes back to his biography, but this is not a biography of River Phoenix, nor am I an expert in it. River Phoenix was kind of an embodiment of light. River dies Halloween 1993. Outside the Viper Room, a bar partially owned by Johnny Depp. Another one of these characters, these hybrid musician actors that didn't quite fit in. But the Viper Room was the place to hang out for this crowd. And you start to realize that the indie scene of LA of the early to mid 90s had a combination of the music scene and the Hollywood acting scene, or actually it wasn't like the Hollywood establishment, but rather the strong indie presence that was happening in Hollywood at the same time. And so these two worlds are not as separate as you might think. So River overdoses outside the Viper Room. Famously, when he dies, I think he's got his brother Joaquin and Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So that's interesting. Flea. So what's the connection between Flea and River? My own private Idaho. They both were in it. That's one place to look at it, right? Who else was in that club that night? Well, no other than John Frusciante. If you know anything about the lore, John quits the Chili Peppers, I believe, in Japan to go into this period of drug-fueled seclusion where he nearly dies and reemerges in 1996. There's the famous Dutch documentary where you see him talking about his taking of drugs, and he just looks really shocking. He looks like a junkie on the cusp of death. And this documentary is from '94. It was shot about a year after River's death. The story is that John is away from the Chili's completely. He's out, he's desolate, he's in his own world, and he's got nothing to do with any of the Chili Peppers' world. So why in the world are John and Flea hanging out together in the same bar in the night of River's death, right? There's something about the stories that we tell ourselves that don't always quite add up, or at least the stories that I told myself, because in my mind, for the longest time, I thought John just moved to Europe somewhere and just completely disappeared off the scene. And then I read and I realized, no, he was in LA. He didn't really move all that far away. And I guess he was still friendly with Flea because they were all hanging out in the same circles still at the time. And presumably this wasn't the only time that this happened. In fact, that night that River died, they were supposed to be performing together. The Viper Room was a performance place. Johnny Depp, still to this day, considers himself more of a musician than an actor. And that was true for River Phoenix as well. River really wished he could be a successful musician rather than an actor. The actor was just kind of a side thing. So they were forming a supergroup. I know that John was supposed to be playing with River, and probably Flea as well. I mean, that might be the reason why he was there. But then again, really? So John and Flea were playing together during that time outside? So, I don't know, maybe you can let me know in the comments if you know. all these people are together. It's certainly drug-fueled. Drugs are just part of the culture at the time. Everyone does the drugs, everyone has the excess, and everyone is testing the limits, not for a hedonistic reason. I think it's not about the pleasures of life. These were people really stretching their ideas about art and artisticness, and how deep can you go into your feelings to express yourself. I mean, that's certainly true for John. I think it was probably true for Rivers as well. I'm not going to go into the allegations that it was Fru who gave River the cocktail that he ended up overdosing on, or encouraging him to take it, or there's different accounts. John and River were hanging out for a while. That's undeniable. There's a couple of songs in John's two first solo albums that are featuring River Phoenix. They were hanging out. They were playing music together. It feels to me like River was really inspired by John, because in some ways John had the most purely artistic expression of who he wanted to be. And the fact that he could express himself through music so easily, that must have been incredibly appealing to River, who was really trying to make a mark as a musician and wanting to learn as much about music as possible. So he would hang out around John trying to get that. And on the other hand, I'm wondering if River's light was kind of counterbalancing John's darkness at the time, because John, he had a will to death. He was looking to die. He had voices in his head telling him that he needs to go to the edge, and that destructiveness was hurting a lot of people in the process. His bandmates, of course, when he just started acting up during shows before he quit the Chili Peppers, girlfriends, whatever, whoever's in the way at that time. I don't think John was self-aware enough. That's part of him. He's a vessel. He just lets the energies go through him, and if these are dark energies, like in that period, well, he's not going to think a lot about the people that are affected. And River is drawn to it, and maybe John is drawn to River because John had a lot of insecurities, and River was magnetic. I talked about charisma here a couple of weeks ago, and River certainly had this amazing charisma. I mean, such a charisma that had Hollywood producers drooling all over the place, like, wow, we can really make a star out of this guy. To end, I want to just take a moment and try to put ourselves in that place, in that time, that late fall night outside the bar, where this force of life is being slowly extinguished. Earlier that night, River said that, oh, I think I'm overdosing, and Bob Forrest was saying, let me take you home. He's like, no. He felt better, but it was just a temporary reprieve, and then he starts to feel bad again. I've never been close to an overdose, so I don't know what it would feel like. I have had some bad trips, and it is scary. I can imagine his head starting to spin, his vision starting to blur, and it becoming hard to breathe. And there's so much light around River. He was this river of life and light, and he's trying to breathe. He just has to get out to the door. The people around him talking, babbling away. It's muted, like a filter going on. You can only hear the bassy. It doesn't matter. Right now he's in his heart, he's in his body, and he's dashing outside, followed by his little brother, his adoring little brother, Joaquin, his girlfriend, Samantha, and the good-hearted Flea. Are you okay, man? What's going on? But he can't stand. His knees buckle under him. He falls to the ground trying to breathe. And he feels that endless light extinguish in front of his eyes. as everything goes black and the sound of ambulances appear in the distance.